Welcome to the How to Succeed podcast, the show that helps you get to the top and stay there. This is how to succeed at adjusting your communication. The following podcast is copyrighted by Sandler Systems Inc. and protected by U.S. copyright laws. Sandler is the worldwide leader in sales, management, and customer service training. You can subscribe to this podcast on iTunes, Google Podcasts, or Spotify, or check out any of our additional resources at sandler.com. I'm your host, Mike Montague, Director of Community Engagement at Sandler, and my guest this week is a longtime Sandler trainer from Toronto, Canada. It's Andrew Wall, and we're going to be talking with him about how to succeed at adjusting your communication. Andrew, welcome to the podcast. Tell me a little bit about DISC behavioral styles and how we use that to adjust our communication.
Morning, Mike. Great to be here. DISC, as you know, it's about communication and decision-making styles. And what we know is extroverts like to talk, introverts like to listen. And so if you're an extrovert dealing with an introvert, well, you've got to talk a little bit less, ask some questions, and actually listen to them. Then if you're an introvert dealing with an extrovert, well, be a little braver, ask some more questions, get involved in the conversation. So if you know your own style, and if you can pick up on other people's styles, you can adjust your behaviors to improve the communication between the two of you.
I think that's a perfect way to start. Now, there's a couple of things because we wanted to make this an advanced session that we should probably check off up front here. One is we offer DISC profiles. So if you don't know what your DISC style is, talk to your local Sandler trainer. If you don't have one, you can go to sandler.com and find one. We offer extended DISC profiles, and DISC stands for dominant, influencer, steady relator, and compliant. And these are just basically different ways of measuring two things. You mentioned extroversion and introversion, and also whether people are task-oriented or people-oriented people. And based on where you fall on those quadrants, you end up as an extroverted, task-oriented person, which would be dominant, or an extroverted, people-oriented person, which would be an influencer. Or then on the introverted side, we have the steady relators who are people-oriented, and the compliance that are introverted and task-oriented. So that sets up DISC for us here. What would you say is what we need to know up front about those things? Because I feel like they don't change naturally, but we can choose to change our styles and adjust. Just because we're not naturally outgoing doesn't mean we can't be a great salesperson. In fact, sometimes introverts are way better salespeople. What would you say about how much of this is fixed and how much of it is actually adjustable?
Well, I believe your DISC primary styles, secondary styles are fairly hardwired. But as you say, Mike, if you know yourself, and if you choose to improve your communications, well, you're going to adjust and adapt. Take me as an example. Extended DISC says my listening skills on a -5, not natural, to a +5, very natural, is -4. And although I might be upset about that, my family would 100% agree, but my clients would 100% disagree, because I do a lot of executive coaching, one-on-one coaching. And listening is a skill, and I've worked on improving my skill at listening. And as a result, I think actually I'm the best listener that the client's going to have to talk about business issues. So it's a perfect example of our hardwired listening skills. They haven't changed, but my knowledge and awareness has. So I've chosen to adapt my style to be more effective with different communication styles of people. So it's really about know yourself and then adjust.
That is really perfect. And I think takes us right into the attitude portion of our discussion, because I've also kind of found on that same front, it's the amount of energy. So if you're a -1, it only takes one of your energy units to adjust back to 0. If you're a -4, you got to take 4 units of energy to adjust back to a neutral listening attitude. Or if you wanted to be a +5 listener, that's a 9 units of energy. So you're not going to be able to do that forever. It would be stressful and you would burn out and it would cause you a lot of energy drain. But in moments of critical conversations, whether that's with your employee, with a client, or even with your friends and family, like you were talking about, it may be worth it to us to invest that amount of energy to make sure this critical conversation goes right. Would you agree? And what do you think are maybe some other ideal attitudes to think about?
I absolutely agree with what you're saying, Mike. And, a lot of the attitudes and beliefs that we have as adults started in our childhood. And in my household, every Sunday started by going to 9 o'clock mass. And I can't tell you how many times I heard, treat others the way you would like to be treated. And my parents reinforced that as well. Well, fast forward, 35 years, and I finally get exposed to extended disc. Boy, I wish I learned this a lot earlier in my life, because I happen to be part of the less than 10% of Canadians that are very direct, very forceful, very big picture. So that means 90% of the people in Canada don't communicate or make decisions like I do. So extended disc for me was just a breath of fresh air for me to understand, it's not that people were intentionally trying to upset me. When I'd say, hey, can you give me a quick high level overview? 10 minutes later, somebody's still giving me minutia. But now I know, okay, that was the high compliance style, or the steady relator that says, well, what did you really want to know? Or the influencer style who was just so happy to engage in conversations with anybody, but didn't actually answer my question. So I know today that it's not about how I like to interact. And, although the church is a great place to go, treating others the way I want to be treated is going to mean 90% of my interactions will be not successful in Canada. So I have to have the attitude of self-awareness and then decide, do I want to adjust and adapt, which I choose to do that.
Yeah, and I think upgrading that golden rule to the platinum rule of treat other people the way they want to be treated is a great attitude and mindset to have. When you think about business, is there anything else? I think maybe for me, sometimes people struggle with, is that disingenuous? Am I not being authentic if I'm adjusting my style? Or is it manipulative if I'm in sales and I'm doing that? How do you answer that? That's a tough question.
And Mike, people think of manipulation as a negative all the time, but if we think of it as, my job is to have a successful relationship with this person, whether I'm the boss and they work for me, whether it's coworkers, or whether I'm dealing with a prospect or a customer. My job is to make the conversation comfortable. And when it's a comfortable, trusting environment, then the truth comes out. And if we don't make that person comfortable, if we don't adjust because our style is 180 degrees different than theirs, then whatever the purpose of the conversation will be unsuccessful. So I don't think of it as a bad thing. I think of it as using psychological knowledge to help us improve our relationships with anybody that we choose to have a good relationship with.
Yeah, I think for me, it's still authentic because we all adjust. We behave differently. Well, like you said, whether we're in church or a classroom or we're out at a ball game or a bar having a drink with our friends, our personalities do adjust to those environments and the people that we interact with anyway. And we might as well use with some intention to get the best results for both parties. So only you know whether in your heart, whether you're doing this to try to manipulate somebody into buying something they don't need, or you're trying to help an employee perform best and do what's best for themselves in their career. That's on you, not on the act of adjusting your communication. But I think that leads us naturally to, okay, great. How do I go about doing that in our behavior discussion here? What would you say?
Well, if I can share a story, one of the things that I share with my clients is that if you start to pay attention to disc styles, you'll notice that different disc styles dress differently. For example, the dominant style in Canada tends to wear that navy blue, that corporate uniform, if you will. The influencer style, on the other hand, very fashionable, colorful clothes. If it's a woman, she's got the purse that matches her shoes. The steady relator is colorful, but not like the influencer bright. They're all muted earth tone type of colors. And then I see the compliant folks wearing a lot of grays, whites, and blacks. Well, a number of years ago, I was approaching a prospect, and I went on their website and looked at their LinkedIn profile, and I noticed a lot of family members that work there. And the corporate website talked about company values, and it talked about family relationships, loyalty. And so I said to myself, this president must be a steady relator. So I show up, I've got my yellow button-down shirt, my beige slacks, my brown shoes and brown belt, and out comes the president. Well, isn't he dressed the exact same way? So we had instant bond and rapport, instant credibility, and that was a wonderful beginning to a long-term relationship where we saw that company just grow and blossom and become all that they wanted to become. And I do believe it was very helpful that I understood DISC, and my natural style would have been to be the corporate blue. And that may have not worked for this second generation family business owner.
No, and is those subtle things that cause not just miscommunication, but I would say trust issues, right? That the further apart you are to start, the more effort it takes to get back to some sort of open and honest conversation and relatability with somebody. And not just necessarily the way you dress, although I love that example, and it's a great actionable behavior that we can do differently, is to mirror and match what our clients are doing and what our prospects are doing, our employees would do naturally. And you can check LinkedIn. I love that you said you did some research, and we have the partnership with Crystal Knows, where if you go to sandler.com/Crystal, you can download a Chrome plugin that'll tell you the person's DISC profile based on their LinkedIn and other publicly available information on them, and give us some insight into that conversation before we even get started. But I think there's a bunch of other things. So I'll let you pick some of your favorites. For me, it's speed and tone. People either tend to be quiet and slow, or they're loud and boisterous. And I can kind of instantly see in the first few minutes of our conversation whether I need to speed up and move because this person's moving quicker than I am, or whether I need to slow down and pause because this person is taking longer to respond. Anything you'd add to that list?
Absolutely, I would agree with you there, Mike. And if you're a student of Sandler training, you understand that all good meetings, particularly sales and prospect meetings, start with an upfront contract. And if you're not familiar with Sandler, essentially an upfront contract is a verbal agreement about how we're going to spend our time together, and it's a mutual participation, and we'll make some decisions at the end of our conversation. And in the upfront contract, the sales professional is going to ask the prospect, well, what would you like to see, hear, or experience today to make this a good use of your time? We've not worked together before. What do you need to learn about Sandler training or Andrew Wall? And immediately, well, the D's might interrupt you, just jump in and tell you right away. So, hello, Mr. D, thank you for identifying yourself. The influencer styles, they're so happy to engage in conversation. They're very light, bubbly, very friendly tonality, tends to be loud, but their conversations don't go direct. They meander. So you can identify those people. And as a result, your meetings are a lot longer. The steady relators, on the other hand, they pause. They might even physically look a little off guard. And I've had steady relators say, well, I sort of thought you would have a plan for how we're going to run this meeting. And I say,
Yeah.
well, I absolutely do. And I might, inject a couple of ideas. And then there's a compliance style. And I remember this so clearly. I was meeting with a commercial renovation company that worked on condominiums, two partners. They became clients. So I can tell you they were both off the chart, super high compliance style. They pulled out 2 pages of questions. So very clearly, when you start to understand DISC and you ask questions, how people respond, not as Mike, you're saying, how loud and how quickly you speak, or how softly and slowly you speak, but the type of information that they're sharing, it really is a roadmap for, okay, knowing who I am, what do I need to do here? Maybe nothing, maybe you're a matching DISC style, but maybe you need to change.
Yeah, I love it when it matches. Let me start there. And I like the examples you gave of the types of information. I've also found it really easy when we go back to that graph of people or tasks, that usually you can tell if you, even just in casual conversation, if you're with a family member and you ask them what they did over the weekend, they're either going to easily share that, or it's going to be kind of awkward and quiet and pulling teeth. And you'll either hear them list, oh, I had a great weekend. I accomplished these 4 things on my to-do list and I organized the garage and all this stuff. Or they say, I had a fantastic weekend. We were playing games with the family. We went out to dinner and I got to socialize with all my friends. You go, okay, pretty good idea that this person is outgoing and a people-oriented person. You can read these things fairly quickly. And this is one that people don't hide too. So as we move to technique here, Andrew, I think one of the things I always recommend is you can almost ask people this one directly, and they will say, please, don't ask me about my weekend. Tell me about the big picture and let's get this meeting moving. They're happy to tell you that because that's how they like to be treated. It's not one that we're hidden or ashamed of a lot of the times. What do you think about that?
That's a great tip for everybody, Mike. When you're meeting people for the very first time, you might start off with, when I sit down with folks, sometimes they're very big picture and that's where they want to stay. Other times, they're in the weeds, they want to know the details. And sometimes when I sit down with people, it's all business. Look, we're here to talk about boom, boom, boom. Other people are like, well, tell me about yourself. They need to get to know you as a person first before they'll trust you and think that you can help them. So asking these questions, people will actually identify themselves as a dominant influencer, study relator, or compliance style. And another tip is it's not uncommon for salespeople or managers who are going to meet with staff, or if 2 staff are working together, that you might send somebody an email saying, hey, looking forward to our meeting. What is it that you wanted to accomplish? Well, based on what comes back to you, the DISC styles are evident. The Ds won't even say, hi, Mike. They'll just say, we're talking about ABC, boom, send. It's probably less than 10 words. It's pretty direct and blunt, and there was no formalities. The influencer styles, they're going to start with big capital letters, hi, exclamation mark, maybe a little happy face. So looking forward to getting
emojis
together.
And gifts, man.
that's what it is, right? And those compliant folks, right? They've got the long laundry list. It is extremely explicit. So if you actually pay attention to emails and text and what information is conveyed, you're getting a really good indication of people's DISC styles. So it's a great technique of reading thoroughly, not just the words, but how many words are there, and that will give you a clue as how to interact more effectively.
And I would assume then the opposite is also true. So one of the things I like to adjust is asking people that I communicate with, what's your preferred method of communication? Would you like me to text you, to send you an email, or pick up the phone? And generally I find people love to tell you that too. Oh, geez, don't call me. I can almost never answer the phone. Shoot me an email and I'll get back to you at the end of the day when I'm done with all my meetings and stuff. Or the other way, they like, email me compliance so I can research this and get you back with a correct answer. I don't like to be, put on the spot if you call me directly and stuff. So I think that's an interesting one to adjust. But when you think about other things we can adjust, or we're replying to these communications, what should we do to maybe match the person once we know their style?
And certainly at Sandler, we're talking about mirroring and matching. So if we choose to use the influencer style as an example, it's super duper important to say, hi, Michael. So looking forward to getting together, chatting about this project. I was thinking that I'm Canadian. I was thinking we'd bring some Tims over. Are you a regular double guy? Let's make this a fun, productive meeting. Boom. So you're adapting to make the other person comfortable. You're in sync. When we sit down together, it's very Canadian to have coffee. It's very Canadian. When we sit down together, we're just starting off on a positive note.
Yeah, that's great. I'll give you one last crack at it here, and then I want to get to know you a little bit more. But anything you would add to tie all this together, or anything that we missed in our discussion of attitude, behavior, and technique?
I think we've been talking about this, but this is the message I share with my clients, whether in our leadership program or customer service program or our sales program. Is I really think of extended disc as three key things. The first thing is know yourself. And you suggested this earlier, Mike. If you haven't completed extended disc, you should do that. It takes less than 15 minutes. It's a very insightful report that it's generally like 25 pages, half of which is all about you, and the other half is all about education about disc styles. And so that's the second point. I say, take an educated guess on the people that you're relating to. Well, if you read the second half of that disc report, it tells you how to identify the different styles and how to adjust to make a better communication. And then the third thing is knowing yourself, taking an educated guess on others. What do you need to do to adjust and adapt to be more successful? So I think it's the attitude of, I need to relate, right? It's the behavior of taking educated guesses on reading, clothing, tonality, the amount of words that they use, and then the technique. Are you mirroring and matching? David Sandler, our founder, said, we've got to treat people the way they want to be treated to be successful.
I love that. He also said there's no personality conflicts in sales. And what he meant by that is there shouldn't be if you're a professional salesperson and you can adjust your communication. So I love that one. Once again, we're talking with Andrew Wall, longtime Sandler trainer from Toronto, Canada. And now it's time to get to know you a little bit here, Andrew. At this point in your career, how do you define success?
That's a great question, Mike. And every once in a while, my clients, when they're prospects, might ask, Andrew, why do you do what you do? And that simple is very easy. And Simon Sinek wrote a book on it, Start With Why. Well, my why is to work with motivated people and motivated companies to help them achieve their goals. It's not for me to tell people what they can or cannot be, but when people have a desire to be better, to be more effective, to have a larger business, or to be a better salesperson, I really enjoy helping them and then seeing that growth occur. And we're fortunate, after being in Sandler now for 18 years, we have tons and tons of super successful success stories, and that's what motivates me.
And what was the biggest lesson learned or hurdle you had to get over maybe early in your career in order to be successful?
Well, it's totally related to DISC. My DISC profile is very high dominant, followed by very high influencer. I'm a natural talker. I've been in sales since I graduated from university. 3 times I got taught what we call traditional selling, features, advantages, and benefits. So I was used to talking, 96% of a meeting. And of course, David Sandler taught us we should be using our product and industry knowledge to ask really good questions and talk only 30% and listen 70%. That was the hardest adjustment for me, is changing my talking to listening ratio.
And do you have a favorite Sandler rule?
I was talking to a client this morning and doing some one-on-one coaching with a business owner. And the rule that came out from that one was, if the competition is doing it, stop it right away. Do something different. I think in sales, and Sandler's a perfect vehicle to make this happen. When you're sitting down with prospects, if you can't use your industry and product or service knowledge to ask better questions, to get them to think differently, well, you're of no value. And the competition typically sits down with the prospect, has a PowerPoint presentation or a brochure they go through, and it's all about me, our wonderful stuff. You buy from us, we'll take great care of you. So if the competition is doing it, stop it right away. The Sandler sales conversation with prospects is totally different. It's engaging. And most importantly, if you enjoy sales, you'll be more successful in a shorter period of time.
I love it. Let's wrap it up for everybody with 3 quick ones. Based on how to succeed at adjusting your communication, what is one attitude you'd like people to have?
It's not about you, it's about them.
And one behavior or key action item you would like them to do?
Change your tonality based on how loud versus their tonality, and the pace of your speech versus the pace of theirs. Extroverts and introverts are different.
And finally, the best technique, tool, or hack to use?
I think you mentioned it earlier, Mike. I'm a huge fan of LinkedIn. It's a great research tool that helps you understand who's in the organization and who might be part of the decision-making process. So using LinkedIn through Crystal, or sometimes it's just doggone easy, because when you go to somebody's profile, sometimes it's like 4 pages long. Well, thank you, Mr. Compliant.
I was going to say, and a bonus tip here from me, anytime you can't figure out what style they are, guess with it's an S, because S has the least amount of triggers, notices, flashy colors, like big red flashing lights about what sign they are. Everybody else will pretty much give it away. So if you can't, guess an S. And for more information on Sandler, you can guess an S and then add an andler.com on the end, and go to sandler.com. Check out our free resources. Reach out to your Sandler trainer about getting an extended disc profile if you haven't already. And as always, click subscribe or share this episode with somebody that you think needs to hear it. Thank you for listening. And remember, whatever you are, be a good one. The How to Succeed podcast is brought to you by Sandler, the worldwide leader in sales, management, and customer service training with over 200 locations. For more information, visit sandler.com.
The Sandler Summit returns in